Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. Boar Bell is a director, producer, and writer best known for his documentaries Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Leaf of Faith, Trophy Kids, and Prescription Thugs. He's also a carnivore and a co-host of the Better, Stronger, Faster podcast with William Shewfelt. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, how's it going, Scott?
Good. Excited to have you.
Yeah, man. I've listened to all your podcasts, and I'm a huge fan of yours too. So it's awesome to actually talk to you.
Yeah. I'm honored and really appreciate you coming on, and excited to talk to you today. So, Chris, for folks who don't know your story, can you just start with, what brought you to carnivore, and start as far back as you like? I think that would be really helpful.
It's a weird full circle story. So, if you go back to listen to the first time I was ever on Joe Rogan, I actually talk about a carnivore diet. And it was about, 3 years ago. And I was talking about it because in the 90s, when I moved to California, I was a power lifter, and I was trying to be as strong as possible at as light a weight as possible. We all know that that's pretty difficult. So a guy named Ron Fedko at Gold's Gym basically just told me, like, hey, you're too fat to be a good power lifter. He was very blunt about it. He said, you just need to lose weight. And I said, well, how do I lose weight? And he just looked me dead in the eye and he said, red meat and water. And he wasn't kidding. And he basically just said, hey, go to the grocery store, buy like a big 5-pound thing of ground beef, cook it up every meal, and that's all you can have. And you'll get to the, down to the 220 weight class, and you'll keep your strength. And I thought he was crazy, but I also didn't know anything about nutrition at all. So I just did it,
That's great.
And, I think sometimes like, diving in with like faith in the, I tell people a lot with carnivore. It's like, trust the process. A lot of times, like we try to, moderate things or do things on our own or do things our own way. I'll add this in or I'll subtract this. And it's like, no, just eat red meat and water. Just do that. And it's that simple. And, when you get, I think too many people put their own decisions in. So when I did something that was that simple, it worked. I got down to the next weight class. I was under 220. But then a couple months later, I was actually under 198, which is the next weight class down in powerlifting. And I was lifting more weight. I was at a over 500-pound bench press, under 198 pounds, which was, kind of good for back then.
Wow.
So, and my other lifts were pretty good as well. So just doing those things, I knew. And I was drug free too. So I knew that, I knew the power of meat. However, like as go life, things happen, and there was no research behind any sort of, it wasn't even called a carnivore diet. We just called it red meat and water. And I'm sure it's been called a million things before that. So, there was no research on it. And I had heard of ketogenic diets. I heard of keto through Dan Duchaine, who was the steroid guru back in the 80s, and he was always pushing ketogenic diets. So Mark and I messed around with ketogenic diets. My brother Mark and I, we messed around with that all the way back in, the early 90s as well. And we messed around with that stuff for years, and we always told people, it's the carbs. So finally, like when keto came around to being a big thing around 2016, we were like, hey, it's about time. Because we've been on this sort of train forever.
Yeah.
But even we didn't know for sure. And I think one of the reasons why Mark and I struggled with our weights so much is because like we kind of had a hunch, but we didn't know for sure. And once we were convinced that like, hey, these processed and refined carbohydrates are definitely the problem in our diet. Eating fake foods is definitely, what's destroying our diet. It wasn't that I just had to eat all meat. It's like I was just eating so much crap. And there were so many chemicals going in my body, I couldn't expect to lose body fat,
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I like how you frame it as the simple solution is the one that works and the one that people can follow. And that self-experimentation is key. Really just dive into it and see what happens. You know, you're not going to get
I like the fact that we can change as a carnivore. We can literally change people's lives with one sentence. And when somebody says, what do I eat? And you say red meat and water, eat red meat, drink water, and thrive. You know, those are your instructions. Go and make sure you get some good, good amount of sleep. I believe that, look, is that a blanket statement to make where, there's probably people going nuts going, he's prescribing this for everybody. But I actually do believe that most people could do this with some degree of success. And I'd say a really big percentage of people that are having problems with their diet now, if you're somebody that's tried everything already and you've already tried this, maybe not so. Like, that's definitely not a cure-all for everybody. But we also know there is a large percentage of people that can just cut the crap from their diets and really thrive.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And I asked for questions from listeners and followers, and I think this is an appropriate time to ask. One of them wanted to know your feelings on the importance of sharing carnivore success stories to give hope to others and to spread the word.
I think that's the most important thing. I think just my story alone, when I don't know if you guys know this, but last year I entered a competition that my brother holds. It's called the Super Training Classic, and I deadlifted 407 pounds, and I have 2 fake hips. And so I started a carnivore diet last year around the same time, and I've been on a carnivore diet for a year. And this year I opened with 507. So I opened 100 pounds heavier on my deadlift. No steroids, no drugs. I haven't been on drugs this year. I've just been on steak, and that was it. So changing my diet and training harder and being able to make a comeback because of several things. My latest documentary, A Leap of Faith, is about kratom. I credit kratom with getting me out of pain and then allowing me to sort of follow a carnivore diet, because when you're not in pain, you can just do things better. In my opinion. So getting out of pain helped me train harder, helped me, really make a comeback. And so I think the carnivore diet was probably the biggest thing that moved the needle, though.
Yeah, that's amazing, Chris. And I was following along with that and super impressed by, obviously you've been doing it forever, but your lifting ability and just that progress you made after having hip surgery is super impressive.
I think, like, also just going back to the answer to the actual question too, like the success stories that I've gotten they're mind blowing. I have a guy, his name is Steve Slauson, and he started following me like a year ago, and him and his wife both wrote me a handwritten letter, which means a lot to me. And the handwritten letters say, like, hey, thanks for saving my life. Thanks for saving my husband's life. He was over 400 and something pounds. And now he's like 200 pounds. And he lost like 150 pounds total. He was like, I think he was close to 400. Now he's like 230 or something like that. So he lost like 150 pounds just following me on Instagram. Like, I didn't actually do anything. I didn't actually ever talk to him until he already lost the weight. And to me, those people are heroes, and those people need to be pointed out. I had another guy. His name is Big Block. Big follows. He's been carnivore for 90 days now. He weighed 611 pounds when he started. He's dropping clothing sizes like it's going out of style. And he's telling me that he won't get weighed in until he's at, I think, 100 days. He's going to weigh in. So I'm kind of waiting for him to weigh in and see how much weight he lost. But I think that's a good idea too. Just like, he doesn't want to get disappointed weighing himself every other day or whatever. And actually, he said he weighs too much, that he can't weigh himself every day. He's got to go to a special place to do it. So I'm just, I'm out there rooting for these guys and pulling for them every day. And I think the more success stories we share, just the better all around,
Yeah, that's really cool and noble of you, Chris. And what a cliffhanger with waiting 100 days.
I know that's not. I think that would be brutal, but you know what? Like, he wants to do it that way. And I always tell people, whatever way works for you, even getting into a carnivore diet, I tell people whatever works for you. They say start, turn, just jump. And say, look, just have a steak a day and then start eating other stuff around it. And you'll notice that other things will just sort of drop out of your diet. Or, you can just go cold turkey and just start it. There really is no one way, I don't think, to do any of this stuff. And I think by if we're not dogmatic about these diets and we're not dogmatic about, like, if you're on a carnivore diet and you have an avocado, nothing's going to happen. You know, like, you might feel a little bit worse, or there are consequences to foods, right? To different foods, but you also might feel better because you have more magnesium and potassium and other nutrients as well. And you have some vitamin C, which isn't found in some other things. And I think even hanging out a lot with Dr. Baker, which I've been doing a lot lately, I pick his brain all the time. And I think he's just misunderstood as far as, you know, he's not dogmatic about this by any means. And, you know, he said, I do this because I'm trying to figure out the science. So I just stay really, really strict. However, I feel you guys can kind of do whatever makes you feel good. You know, you're not doing it for a scientific purpose, you know? And so I think, well, people have to remember that, just like eat what makes you feel good, you know, and mainly eat steak. That's what I say.
Performance enhancing steak.
It kind of is. I call it steakroids, actually. I think that, if you talk to Stan Efferding, who's one of the smartest people I know,
The Rhino.
The Rhino, he'll flat out tell you, and you got to get him on here too. He'd be awesome. He'll flat out tell you that you know, steak is the way to go. He takes all the bikini models that he coaches, and he takes them off of chicken and fish, tilapia, and all this crappy they hate, and he puts them right on steak. You know, and he just substitutes, like, rather than having you know, 2 cups of rice a day, they'll have 1 cup of rice a day and have some steak. So they're just like changing out their calories with a little bit of fat, you know, and stuff like that, instead of having something that's void of nutrients. And I think, you know, Stan's just a genius with all the stuff he's doing with the vertical diet. And if there's one other diet out there or sort of way of eating that I can highly recommend that's like right in line with our carnivore diet, it would be a vertical diet. And you'll see that there's like a lot of similarities between what Stan's doing. It's mainly a red meat diet with some carbs thrown in here and there. And so if you're trying to go for performance, that might be a way people want to go. You know, I see a lot of people going back and forth with great success, some really great strength athletes like Matt Wenning and stuff like that, going back and forth between more carnivore and a vertical diet. So I think we've learned that red meat's really important either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely not dogmatic about it. In fact, there was an excellent video by I'm going to mess up his last name, but I think it's Matez. He wrote a book called The Hyper Carnivore Diet. And he explains, just for technical definition, that carnivore is anyone who eats any meat at all. So omnivores are carnivores. And as long as you eat some meat, you're a carnivore. And the term hypercarnivore means having something like 70% of your diet come from meat or more. So you can be a hypercarnivore and thrive off meat and, you know, throw in some avocado, just like you say, or throw in some berries, throw in whatever side stuff you want. And it's still better than, it might even be better than a pure meat diet, and it's definitely better than a standard American diet. So
I think it's better than a pure meat diet, just for the fact that, like, throwing a couple things in here and there are gonna just allow you to not get sick when you do throw. You know, like at some time something's gonna happen and you're gonna go back to eating normal for maybe you might have to go back to eating normal for a couple weeks or whatever. You never know what happens in your life, right? So I just feel like having a couple things here and there will also, like, give you other nutrients that you're not going to get from meat. And, you know, it's just like, just be smart about it, you know?
Yeah.
I think that eating just all meat all the time might, you know, I don't think anything's going to happen to you necessarily, but, you know, why not throw in, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that here and there, like, that you're not getting as much of from meat. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
As long as it's not affecting you negatively, you know?
Yeah, and it's all contextual, right? You know, if someone's managing their arthritis or their, PCOS or ulcerative colitis or some more severe condition with meat, or, you know, someone like Amber O'Hearn who has to eat only meat, otherwise her depressive symptoms come up, then totally get it. You should be as strict as you need to be. But for your average person trying to just look a little bit better, feel better, perform well in the gym, I see no problem with throwing in.
It's so hard to say that it affects your mental state, like eating anything other than meat, because that could be, to even think that, it's like so subjective, right? So it's hard to tell. Like, it's hard to tell if you ate something else other than meat, if you're depressed or not. Like, it's really, like, those things are just really difficult to even, you can't put numbers on them. So yeah, certain people will just say, like, hey, I'm just going to draw a line in the sand, and that's probably a good idea for them, but we'll never get any studies on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Chris, one thing you've become an expert on is managing pain. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that, and maybe we can dive into, just for folks who aren't familiar, your history with pain and what kratom is and how that can help folks too.
Yeah. So, I've always had pain ever since I was young, and I never knew what was causing it. And when I started powerlifting when I was young, and then shortly thereafter, I needed a double hip replacement surgery. By the time I was 5 years old, I needed double replacement surgery. And that's really young, And so I had no idea, really why I had that. But obviously I had some sort of autoimmune issue, I was never really aware of. And I had to get double hip replacement surgery. And at the time, I didn't know anything about prescription drugs or anything like that. So they did both hips at the same time. I ended up getting addicted to drugs, to Percocet and Oxycontin and any kind of drug that you can imagine. Long story short, I was addicted to drugs for about 6 years. I also became an alcoholic during that time because they just kind of go hand in hand. When you drink, it makes the pills work better. And when you can't sleep, you drink yourself to sleep and then add on some pills with it. So it was kind of a rough road for quite a while. During that time, I also lost my brother to basically what boils down to a drug addiction due to prescription painkillers. It was prescription painkillers and, in and out of rehab for alcohol and all these kind of things that sort of are in my family. Had an uncle die really young of a cocaine overdose. And, my brother, went the same way. He died at 37 years old. And I was going the same exact way. I was going, right the way he was going. Interestingly enough, before I knew that it had any effect on your mental capacity whatsoever, when I got into rehab, I didn't like the food that they had there. So I told them I was allergic to carbs. And I went on basically a carnivore diet. I only ate meat, and I had no idea. This is in 2014, so there was no carnivore movement. There wasn't, there was nothing going on like that. I just ate only meat and whatever else was keto. Maybe they had some cottage cheese or something else like that. I would eat that. So while I was in rehab, pretty much the whole time, that's how I ate. And so, but when I got out of rehab, I was sort of eating whatever I wanted to. Because of my double hip replacement surgery, this is about 4.5 years ago. I had, double hip replacement surgery 10 years ago, but, this is after I got out of, after I went through the addiction and everything too. So a lot of time had gone by and I was very inflamed. Everything hurt all the time. My ankles would swell up to the point where, they would have about 2 inches of fluid in them. So like an old lady, you could push in on the fluid and it would stay indented for a couple seconds.
Wow.
And that's like pitting edema, in your legs. And I had really poor circulation in my legs. The more sugar I ate, the more, my legs would inflame. It was literally simply from sugar. I can do it today in a heartbeat. If somebody doesn't believe me, I can eat a bunch of stuff with sugar in it. My legs will blow right back up. So in a way, I can't eat, and I should say refined sugar. I can actually eat fruit and those things don't happen, which I find to be interesting. But I eat fruit in its whole form. I don't drink fruit juice, or anything like that. Just once in a while, I'll have a little bit of fruit, but I don't get that with fruit. I only get it when I eat crap, and even if I just eat refined carbohydrates as well. But yeah, I think for me, embarking back on this journey, the red meat journey, really helped me get out of pain. So what happened was, I had been introduced to kratom, and just a friend of mine had seen Prescription Thugs. And then he said, "Hey, I saw Prescription Thugs and I wanted to introduce you to kratom." And I was like, "What's kratom?" I had no idea what it was. For those who don't know, kratom's a plant from Southeast Asia. It's in the same family as the coffee family. And it's just a capsule that you take that basically works just like Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet, any of those strong opioids, but it's about as addictive as coffee. So when I found that out, I was like, there's no way that this works. I just thought if it's not a drug, there's no way that it works. it's got to be, cheap. There's no way that that can actually take my pain away. So, a guy introduced me to it. I had tried it a couple times. And then, after like the third or fourth time trying it, it just hit me, it just worked. And, I just felt all my pain was gone. And I really couldn't believe it. I was kind of in shock, and I called the guy up and I said, hey, I think we need to make a documentary about this. And that's sort of how A Leaf of Faith was born, which is my latest documentary on Netflix. And if people want more information on kratom, that's a great place to get it. I also was on Joe Rogan's podcast. I did an entire podcast on kratom. But basically what it is, it's just a plant that it attaches to your opioid receptor and it alleviates pain. But because it's not damaging like like opioids, the opioid painkillers that are on the market right now are designed to attach to opioid receptors. It's 1,000 times greater than anything in nature. And so, what happens is when they attach, that's not really the problem. The problem is that when they leave the receptor, they cause damage. And when they cause damage, that creates a craving. And then that craving needs to be filled by more drugs. But kratom doesn't damage the receptor. So because it's like just a much more mild version, it doesn't damage the receptor. It doesn't cause that craving, and it doesn't cause that addiction. We have seen people get physically dependent on kratom, just to be fully transparent with it and not be the guy that says like everything's perfect and it'll cure everything. We have seen people get physically dependent on it, and the people that get physically dependent on it are usually taking a really high dosage of it. And that's usually the reason, because it can be slightly by volume, just like so anything. If you do a lot of marijuana, you're going to end up trying to do it every day also.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And thank you for sharing, being so transparent about your story, Chris. I think it's really important to acknowledge, and I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired by it.
Yeah, I should add to it too a little bit, just to stay on the pain topic really quick. You have, so using kratom allowed me to be out of pain enough to like go back to deadlifting and squatting. And for anybody out there that's in pain, I highly recommend Dr. Stuart McGill's book. I think it's called The Back Mechanic. And if you don't want to buy a book, you can just go on YouTube, and there's some free videos. Stuart McGill's Big Three, they call them, and Lane Norton does a video on it as well. And there are 3 exercises you can do in your warm up that will really help your lower back. And I think just doing some of these simple exercises are really going to help. I think doing a 10-minute walk after every single meal is really going to help. That's getting my dad and my mom back to health right now. We just literally have them walk 10 minutes after they eat. If you talk to, again, the Rhino Stan Efferding, he'll tell you that helps with blood sugar, but it also is just going to help people that don't move very often. It's going to give them, again, draw a line in the sand, give them something they have to do every day. And it's really simple to do. And then the other aspect of getting out of pain was a carnivore diet. So a diet that, in the beginning, I was actually very skeptical, because I was saying to Sean Baker, I'm like, everybody's telling me that red meat's inflammatory. And he just said, hey, you just have to trust me on this, which I thought was actually really cool. He's like, you just have to trust me on this one. I was like, okay, I trust you, because he couldn't really explain it. He's like, yeah, some people do say it's inflammatory, that you're going to see that, but I'm telling you it's not. And I'm just telling you, trust me and try it. And so it went from, what happened is, this is kind of great. So, my brother Mark and I, we were filming a documentary about the ketogenic diet, right? More full transparency. So we're making this keto movie, and we're going full blast, like trying to say, hey, keto is amazing. Everybody should try keto. And as we're making this keto movie, Sean Baker kind of throws a monkey wrench in it. And we learn about the carnivore diet. And I said, well, I'll try the carnivore diet for 2 weeks. Well, I've been on the carnivore diet for over a year now. We're still kind of making a movie, but the idea of it has changed like a million different directions. And I think it's just becoming more of a journey of Mark and I through fitness and what we've learned in the past 2 years that will sort of amount to more of an education on nutrition than anything, that I think will be more helpful and useful to people than, a dogmatic piece that we were going to put out because we just thought that was the way to go. But that's what I love about documentaries taking so long. You never know where you're going to end up, So I still don't know what the end story will be, but I know that it'll be much stronger than we originally wanted it to be, because we've taken more time with it, and we've also listened to a lot more people. And I think that that's important, to open your mind and listen to people.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it, Chris. I've loved all your films and rewatched them. You do such a good job of storytelling and tying things together and just entertaining while educating. And I'm very excited for your next one.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I just hope that, it's funny because, I was so worried about, like everybody's like, when's it going to come out? When are you going to finish it? And I'm just at this point where I'm like, you know what, man, it doesn't matter. Like, well, I'll finish it when I finish it. And, I'm not really too worried. I'm just still telling people I'm making it. I would love to have nobody know that I'm making something, but in the world of social media and everything like that, everybody already knows. So it's like, might as well just be transparent to say, yeah, I'm making a movie. It'll be done when it's done. Hopefully you'll like it,
Yeah.
But I still think there's a lot left. There's a lot of unfinished business left. I mean, we've got on this carnivore train, right? And now we have all this, other stuff coming from the vegan side. And I just think that stuff still hasn't shaken out yet quite, to the point where, we know what's going on. So like there's, all these people trying to tax meat and all that crazy stuff that's going on. Like, I want to see more what's going to happen with that stuff. It's really fascinating to me and really kind of crazy to me too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of concerning, but I'm glad that there are people like Sean Baker and Nina Teicholz to kind of fight that battle. And just while you brought it up, Chris, Stuart McGill, I'm a huge fan. I do the big 3 back exercises every rest day, and have been doing so for over a year.
That's great.
And I come from back pain too, and it's
good minds think alike, And then also, even things like, my brother makes the hip circle. The hip circle is a great device, for rehab for your hips and for your lower body. This actual slingshot itself, if you have any upper body injuries, like on your chest, for your chest and shoulders, just a regular slingshot. Like, I don't bench press without a slingshot now because I don't want to screw up my shoulders. I'm 46 years old. And I don't want to get hurt, so I just do things that, a slingshot just helps absorb some of the punishment. Things like the iron neck will help you with if you have any sort of neck injuries or even head trauma. So there's all these gadgets out there and all these things that are really moving the needle for people. I think, hot and cold therapy is amazing. And there's just a lot of things out there now that we can along with our diet to get us out of pain.
Yeah. And Chris, talking about addiction to drugs and alcohol, do you think carnivore can help for folks with that?
What's kind of amazing? I would love to do this. I would love to go around to all the rehabs and speak to people about keto and carnivore. I think it's kind of hard to walk into a rehab center. We had a bunch of vegans that were in rehab with me, so to say like, hey, you got to do carnivore. But to offer it as an option would be a great idea. And I think, cause you can't make anybody do anything, but yeah, offering it as an option and just even like, I think maybe the first day, I'm going to suggest this actually at a Cliffside Malibu where I went to rehab. I'm going to suggest that maybe on the very first day that like I could come in once a month and do like a nutrition breakdown, like just talk to people for an hour. Like, hey, you're here in rehab. It's time to start over. Like, let's talk about the things that, you might not want to eat here.
Yeah.
And, it's up to you. You're in a period of transition. It might be the last thing people want to hear, but it could also just be optional, because I think there are a lot of people that want to hear it. I had so many people eating keto in my house. It was crazy. The chefs didn't know what was going on. They're like, we've never cooked so much bacon in our lives. And that's because I told people like, hey, switch out get rid of that cereal. You'll feel like shit all day. Just like have the bacon, have that, and it wasn't always the best choices, but we had pretty good food and we had bacon, we had chicken, we had eggs, we had, had beef, so, it always sort of worked out. And I didn't even know about really getting rid of vegetables then. I wish I did, because if I would have ate more meat, I would have got more jacked while I was in rehab because it was all you can eat,
Yeah.
So at some point it was,
Yeah, it's a good deal.
Worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And that would be really awesome to do, even if a few people picked it up.
I should say and just so people know, like the way that So the way that a carnivore diet works with addiction, right? If you eat, one thing, and you know this as well, just from the carnivore diet as well. Like even if it was a sweet potato, even if it wasn't meat, and you just ate a sweet potato and that was all you ate all the time, right? You just get so used to it that, all your cravings go away, right? Like when you're on a carnivore diet, I hear you talk about it all the time. All the cravings just sort of drop off for anything else, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to be the same thing. Like, when you crave other things, like, I've just noticed that I don't crave sort of anything on a carnivore diet. And also what's really nice is kratom has a very similar action in, a lot of people use kratom to get off of opioids. And a lot of people actually use kratom to get off of crystal meth and alcohol in other countries because, it has this, effect where this kind of leaves you happy and you don't really crave things. So I think kind of like all together, kratom, carnivore, keto, like all that stuff kind of works together really well, in just helping you stay on track. It's kind of a great snowball effect,
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a super interesting study that my last guest, Alex Danes, actually posted on Facebook showing ketogenic diet in mice. And they had two groups. One was on a ketogenic diet, one wasn't, and they gave them cocaine. And the dopamine response to cocaine was lower in the ketogenic mice. So the actual addiction mechanism was blunted when they were on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, there's also, we're in this country, we're in a chase for dopamine constantly. We're constantly chasing like the quick fix. So it's interesting that you mentioned, dopamine, because that's the reward center of our brain, right? And things like sugar and drugs, they trigger that dopamine response. But if you look at, the Hacking of the American Mind by Robert Lustig, it's one of the most amazing, speeches on YouTube I've ever seen. He talks about how, basically the American mind has been hacked to where we chase dopamine so much that we forget about chasing serotonin. And by, things that increase serotonin are getting a hug from your mom, having your girlfriend say, I love you, the things that really matter. But we're always chasing like the Instagram likes, and the porn or like the quick fixes, right? And so, if we start embracing, serotonin more and stop chasing all these little dopamine, hits, we're basically going to be a lot happier overall, and a lot happier leads to a lot healthier. My brother Mark, he runs a business, Slingshot, and, it's really successful and it's really stressful also. So, this weekend he just did a dopamine fast where he has a beach house in Bodega Bay, and he went away by himself, no phone, no texting, no nothing, just, a notepad. And that was it, and, he said it was really hard. He couldn't do anything. And I think maybe we heard Ben Greenfield talk about it, doing like a dopamine fast. And so Mark was like, hey, I want to try that. And he said it was really difficult because we're so used to getting that, pleasure center in our brain hit. And when you're on a carnivore diet, I feel like, you're never chasing that anymore. You don't feel that way. You don't feel like out of control at all.
Definitely shifts.
Ryan told me, this is fascinating. I have a friend that, he's been in and out of prison. He's a guy I know from Gold's Gym. He's got a heart of gold, but he just grew up really rough. And, he always had mental health issues. He's very, bipolar. And, he told me the other day, hey man, I feel so good that I feel like I should get off this diet. What are you talking about, man? He's like, I feel way too good that I feel like something bad's going to happen. He's like, I'm not on any medication and I've never felt this good, so it's like we were talking about, there might not be any proof that it works for mental health, but that's proof enough, right? Like that's all that, like I said, there might not be scientific proof, but you have somebody that's acting like that. That's all the proof we really need, and, I just thought it was funny and ironic. I thought it was kind of sad in a way that he's never felt that good, that he felt like he doesn't even deserve to feel that good. And I'm like, no, you deserve that. You know?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's almost like the same thing with overweight folks not accepting their self-image as a lighter person after they lose weight. Similar phenomenon. And Chris, you've been in strength training for so long, and you go into this in Bigger, Stronger, Faster, but just quickly for folks, what got you interested in strength training in the first place? And more importantly, what's inspired you to stay in it for so long?
Well, Ed Coan is a legend in powerlifting. And if you guys don't know who he is, you can follow him on Instagram. It's at Eddie Coan, EDDYCOAN. He's the strongest guy to ever walk the face of the earth. He's about 5'6". So he's my height, and he's about 5'6" wide as well. But Ed Coan deadlifted 900 pounds at, I think at 198. And I think he squatted over 1,000 at 220. And this is back before any of the equipment was even any good. There wasn't really any crazy squat suits, or, he benched 585 with no bench shirt. He was just a savage, And when I was young, I had this doctor, and he taught me how to squat. His name was Tom Starace, and he was in Poughkeepsie, New York. He was our strength coach. And I just remember I'd always go to him, and when I had a problem with my knees when I was very young, had arthroscopic knee surgery. And he told me, like, hey, if you're going to if you're going to come back to football, you have to squat. And it's kind of interesting because our whole football team made fun of this guy because he had a lisp, right? But I didn't ever care about things like that. So I befriended this strength coach, right, that had a lisp. And people would make a big deal about it that I was friends with him, because kids are just mean, But look what I got out of it. I was squatting, 550 pounds by the time I graduated high school.
Wow.
Because I had a coach that knew what he was doing, I had a guy that would help me all the time out of the, just out of the bottom of his heart. And all the other kids at the school, were like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm listening to the coach you guys make fun of. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people missed the boat on getting strong I think that's a good lesson. It's like I had access to something that other people didn't have. And by having a great coach and people teach you. And then like when I moved to California, I met that guy, Ron Fedko, and Ron Fedko's training partner was Mike O'Hearn. If you know who Mike O'Hearn is, he's
Beast.
Titan, they call him. Yeah. He's, one of the biggest, strongest people on the face of the planet, And so, being able to train with Mike O'Hearn when I'm in my 20s and he was in his 20s was, something that I carry with me for life. Mark and I have trained with John Cena, a lot. John Cena was one of our best friends when he lived in California. We're the ones that, brought him to wrestling. So Mark and I have like a long history with a lot of great people in the fitness industry. We've been, we've helped people come along. We've been part of their team, as they win championships and things like that. Mark sponsors Brian Shaw, who's the world's strongest man. He sponsors Ben Smith, who is one of the CrossFit Games champions. Like we've had a great a chance to really rub elbows with some of the best people in the industry. And I think that that's what sets Mark and I apart from kind of everybody out there, is that we've been lucky enough to really be able to rub elbows with everybody and be able to befriend everybody and have access to all their knowledge. Like Mark just lost weight for a powerlifting contest, right? So first he did a bodybuilding show, and his coach for his bodybuilding show was Hani Rambad, who coaches Phil Heath,
Wow.
And then he just did a powerlifting meet, and his powerlifting meet, he had George Lockhart doing his weight cut. George Lockhart does all the UFC weight cuts, for all the big time fighters. So I think, like, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying, like, hey, that's pretty cool that we get to do those things.
Yeah.
And we're pretty blessed and lucky to get to do it. So that's why we love to share it with everybody else,
Yeah, that's awesome, Chris, that you get to be a part of that community and interact with all those people. And even I feel the same way about the carnivore movement.
Yeah,
and,
there's nothing more fun than a carnivore meetup.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a blast, man. Like we had one here in Playa Vista at a place called Hop Dottie. Hop Dottie restaurants are a burger bar, and they sponsored it and they paid for everything. And we just had a bunch of carnivores come out and just hang out. The food was free.
Wow.
Everybody sort of chipped in for the servers, and the servers loved it, and the people there loved it. The food was great, and it was just a great atmosphere. There was no agenda. We just talked about the diet, talked about what we were eating and what we were doing. And what I really found, like the number one thing that I've learned from meeting a bunch of carnivores, is that this diet is great. A, it fixes a lot of health problems. B, and C, calories do matter. Because I feel like one of the things that we talk about so much at the carnivore meetup is like, hey, I want to get bigger or I want to get smaller, right? I want to get bigger, I want to get skinnier. And there's only two gears, right, that we have. We can eat more or we can eat less. Now your body can get used to eating less, and that can be a problem. So you might have to like eat less food more often, manipulate those kind of ways. I actually got a lot out of one of your last podcasts with the corporate warrior. I think you were telling him what you do, and you were saying that you do intermittent fasting, but to mitigate the cortisol response, you eat in the morning. And I've been doing that lately. I really like that. Yeah. So I stole that from you. So if I get shredded, it's your fault.
And if it doesn't work, you can sue me.
Yeah. But I just feel like, I don't feel like calories matter to the point where like, hey, if you up it by 20 or lower it by 20, something miraculous is going to happen.
Right.
I'm just talking about the fact that, if you want to weigh less, you're going to have to eat less food eventually, and it's just a fact that I've begrudgingly accepted. I was on the whole war on carbs thing forever, and I still think that it is a thing, and you can, I can basically maintain my body weight by eating a pretty good amount of food. But if I want to get ripped, then there's other things that need to come into the equation.
Yeah. Well, I think you do yourself a disservice, Chris. You look pretty damn good. Your pictures on Instagram.
Oh, thanks. I'm getting there.
But yeah, no, I've come to the same conclusion that, I think of it like, I don't know, I'll pick an analogy, but like a car, if you want your car to look normal, then like you can do just like pretty easy things and it'll look fine. It'll look good. Mm-hmm. But if you want it to look like elite, like 6-pack shredded, you need to put a little more effort in there. You need to, focus a little bit more on quantities, fat content, and that's where calories start to come in with, bodybuilding and body recomposition.
Yeah, the thing is that people don't understand in the carnivore keto world is like I come from the bodybuilding world basically, and everybody over there is shredded. They're eating carbs, and so what you look like is different than it's a different thing that you have to do. Like when Mark did his bodybuilding show, he didn't do a carnivore diet. He used carbohydrates because a look is different than performance. I don't think you necessarily need them. They're not going to build muscle. That's another thing I learned that I think is really interesting. We had thought we needed them to build muscle, but now we're seeing studies that you don't actually need carbs to actually build muscle.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. And those are just kind of some newer things I think are just coming out, right? I think Dr. Baker was telling me about that. But, just things like, carbohydrates are going to make the muscles look fuller and push, it's going to push the blood through the system and push your veins out and all that kind of stuff like that. So for a look, it's a little bit different. And I'm by no means a fan of carbohydrates. I don't even like them. I don't even like talking about them. But I know that they are definitely utilized in bodybuilding, and to achieve a certain look, they're probably, pretty helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. And I think sometimes to get to a certain, Sean Baker even calls it like an unsustainable and potentially unhealthy level of body fat. You have to do kind of extraordinary things. I think you even talked about this with Ted Naiman on your recent podcast.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that like I was asking Dr. Baker, I'm like, man, you don't take this the wrong way. You look awesome, but like you just eat meat and water, right? That's all you eat. And because I throw in a couple things here and there, so I don't know, if it's because I'm throwing in a couple things here and there. I'm like, why wouldn't you just get like so shredded to the point, and he's like, it's still going to come down to calories, and I eat too much, he's like, I would have to cut my calories back to the point where then it would be unsustainable. I would just be too hungry.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm about 10 to 12% body fat, but if I want to be 6, I got to really drop down. And that it really opened my mind. Because hearing that from him, I was like, oh, okay. He's like, normal people aren't, even back in our caveman days, like the normal person wasn't walking around completely shredded.
Right. Yeah.
But that's what I'm thinking in my head. I got that picture in my head from Tarzan cartoons or something,
Yeah, no one
But
can, not everyone can be William Shewfelt.
yeah, I know, right? But what I love about this and what I say about this to everybody is like, how great is it that, I hope nobody ever takes me seriously as an expert because I'm a filmmaker and what I like to do is go out and explore these things, right? And so to me, I'm always like, hey man, my truth is subject to change. What I think one day,
Right.
I might not think the next day. So, that's why like when I'm making a movie, I want to really think it out. I want it to be in my mind for a couple of years, not just for a couple months or a couple of days. I want it to be something I really think through the whole thing. And then when we get to what we want to say, we can just let it all out.
Yeah, that's great. I love that slow method of building a story because once you do put it out, it feels so polished and so powerful.
Yeah.
But that journey.
I think what people will love, I think what people will love on this journey is that, my parents are in it again and they're involved, and they're losing weight, they're exercising, they're doing all sorts of stuff. And so, I think that people always tell me that they watch Bigger, Stronger, Faster and they love my parents. So we didn't think it was going to happen, but about halfway through us filming, my parents just decided to hop on a diet and it wasn't forced. It was just organic, it just happened. And so, my mom, was getting a back surgery and she lost, I think, about 75 to 80 pounds already. And then my dad lost like probably 50 pounds, something like that. But their health is so much better, which is that's the really important thing. I don't care if they lose a pound, I just want them to be healthy. And so I think that, having them involved is going to be a great thing and a great message to send to other people and other families as well.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And, getting jacked and tan is one thing, but helping people achieve health and doing it through your parents is super inspiring.
And getting jacked and tan is difficult. People don't understand. Seriously, I started doing this. I just want to be transparent again. Like I started doing this a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, like the sort of keto and carnivore again. And I just dedicated myself to being, the best that I can be. And I've been trying really hard, been training really hard, been eating like almost perfect. And I'm still like not where I'm like not even really that close to where I want to be. Like I still know that I know you say I'm underselling it, but there's still a lot of work I can do. And so I just want to let people know that if they're struggling with this diet or with like getting the physique that they want, that it's difficult. And if it was easy to do, everybody would have a perfect physique, So yeah. For some people it's easier than others. But don't give up on it. It's definitely worth it. Like everything that I'm doing is a lot of fun. I love doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to enjoy the journey. And Chris, on that note, what does sort of a day of eating look like for you? And, where do you get your food? How do you cook it?
Yeah. Awesome. So, lately I've just been using the air fryer like crazy. So I have a Gourmet air fryer. It was like $70 at Costco.
Nice. Me too.
I use a sous vide. So I'll use a sous vide. I also have another thing I recommend is this Philips indoor grill. So it's a little bit expensive. It's like $279, but you can cook indoors just like a regular grill. It gets up to like 425 degrees and, cooks everything like nice and even. So I cook on the Philips grill, but you can use that to finish stuff, or I can use that, I could use that with the sous vide to finish that, or I can just grill up burgers on it or do whatever. But I actually really like the air fryer. It's really simple, It's almost like using a microwave, but everything comes out nice and crispy.
Yeah.
So I use my morning meal, like literally is just it's just lately it's been steak and steak. So I usually eat, one, and I get these gigantic steaks from Costco. They're like these giant ribeyes. And so sometimes I'll get ribeyes, sometimes I'll get fillets. If I get fillets, I'll usually cook up 2 of them because they're leaner. If I get ribeyes, I'll just eat the whole thing. So, my fat intake is varying just based on the meats that I eat. I don't really do it on purpose, but I kind of think that's good. Just getting like random different amounts of fat, throughout the week because I'll go to Costco a couple times a week. I really like fresh meat. I have a real problem like having a ton of it in the freezer and doing that whole thing. So I just end up going to Costco a lot, but it's really close to my house. And it's usually like 2 steaks a day. lately I've been eating these carrot finish steaks. Have you heard of that?
No, what's that?
So Santa Carota or Santa Carota, it's Santa Carota, if people want to look it up, at Santa Carota. They are a beef company, like a farm, and what they do is they start the cows on grass for like 80% of their life, and then they finish them with carrots. And the carrots give it like a juicy, they make the meat juicier and they make the meat sweeter. And it's juicier because I guess the carrots are like 88% moisture, and the grass that they eat is 88% dry. So that's what it says on the on the thing that they sent me. But I found them online and I shouted them out, and they sent me a bunch of meat. So I think you should shout them out. Appearing on this, I'll send you a box of meat because it is so good. I don't really like grass-fed meat, and I take some flack for it here and there, but I just don't like the way it tastes. It's not my thing. I wasn't brought up on it. Yeah. And so this carrot finish stuff has the same kind of nutrient values as would grass-fed, but it just has a different flavor.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have been dying for people to send me free meat.
After Santa Carota, they're really cool.
I'll try. But that sounds delicious. Carrot finished meat. Never would have thought of that.
There's also, I'm trying to get my hands on some Belgian blue. I don't know if you remember, in Bigger, Stronger, Faster, there was the giant bull.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so that giant bull is a Belgian blue bull. And I would like to get some Belgian blue and cook that up because that was when I was there, I ate some of that steak, and that steak was the steak that I ate it has double muscle, these cattle, and because they're double muscled, the steak was about as tender as eating like sashimi, like sushi, you know?
Wow.
So it was just like you just could cut it with like a fork, and so I want to try to get some of that too, but I haven't found that yet. I'm in, like, what I like about carnivore is like finding new things. You know, I found like a bone broth that's like kind of like a Jello. You know, when it starts out, it's all like blobby, and it's like the best bone broth because it's made with, you know, a lot of the knuckles and different things like that. So for me, you know, I don't know if it does anything, but I think it's probably good for my joints. You know,
the collagen.
Yeah. So at least I think it is. So.
That's what they tell me. Well, Chris.
Well, I actually heard recently, I was taking all this collagen, right? I'm jamming collagen down my throat like it's going out of style. And then I read an article, and I don't know I don't know if this is actually true or not. They're saying collagen actually doesn't really help your joints because it's just the amino acids, and the amino acids don't specifically know where to go to help your joints. So basically, if you up your protein, it's the same as taking a bunch of collagen. I don't know if it's true. But
that's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I had Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on. She's a doctor in New York who focuses on muscle. And she was talking about how you shouldn't count collagen protein towards your like total protein.
Yeah, towards your protein. Yeah, because it's not going to build muscle at all.
Exactly. But it does have an additional benefit that just regular protein with a full amino acid profile would have. But yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't looked enough into the science on that.
I think we get bamboozled a lot, you know?
For sure.
We talk about pain a lot, and I should be, again, transparent. I've told people to take curcumin in the past, and now I tell people it's a waste of time. But there is one form of curcumin that's actually good, the Mariva curcumin, right? You got to get that specific kind. Otherwise, it's not going to help with inflammation because we can't absorb turmeric. We can't absorb normal curcumin. It's got to be Mariva curcumin is like the patent name of it. And there's another brand. The one that I heard works the best is sold at the Human Garage. And that one actually does work on inflammation, you know, but I think we get bamboozled a lot with these, you know, hey, this is going to help your joints. This is going to help your back, you know, and a lot of these things just don't work. That's why I like things that you can feel. I like using kratom because I can actually feel it, you know. When I use something like curcumin and it's saying it's lower inflammation, I'm not really sure. When I use CBD, I'm not really sure, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to really determine what what works and where you're being swindled. And important to, be skeptical.
Absolutely.
Chris, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this. Where can folks find you? Definitely your Instagram,
Sure.
and wherever else.
Yeah. So, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Big Strong Fast. And then also if, people would like to see my newest movie on Netflix, it's called A Leaf of Faith. My other films, Prescription Thugs is also on Netflix. If you go on iTunes, you can see Trophy Kids. And if you go on Hulu, you can see Bigger, Stronger, Faster. Also, if you guys want to look into my brother's products, which I mentioned, it's markbellslingshot.com. You can use the code BOAR10, BOAR 10 for a 10% discount. If you guys are looking to order some kratom, A Leaf of Faith, you can go to urbaniceorganics.com and you can use the code Leaf of Faith for a discount over there. So that's my stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'll definitely link up the podcast too, with you and William. Folks should definitely check that out. I get excited about every new episode.
Awesome, man.
Well, thanks so much again for your time, Chris.
Absolutely, Scott. Great talking to you.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.